Good morning. Time is approximately 9:30 in the morning. Today is October the 18th. We're having a work session here at the Board of County Commissioners. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to ask Commissioner Hurd to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Can we all stand, please? Commissioner?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Work session will be on the Seminole County Transportation Concurrency Exceptions Area Study. Before we go directly to staff, I would like to ask the Acting County Manager, Mr. Applegate, any comments before we turn it over to your staff?
No, Mr. Chairman. I think at this point I'm going to turn it over to, looks like John Dredge or Bill Wharton. All right, great.
Thank you.
Good morning. Bill Wharton, Transportation Planning Manager for the Engineering Division of the Public Works Department. And Chairman and Commissioners, I'd first like to say thank you for showing up on one of your days off. Not usually here, so we do appreciate that. Have two projects we'd like to discuss with you. First one is the TCEA, Transportation Concurrency Exception Area study that we're doing, and then the second one is the update to the 2040 Transportation Plan. The BCC had a retreat a while ago where key strategic issues were discussed for the county, and out of those, the key strategic priorities came about. One of those was dealing with growth management, and the priority itself was to effectively manage growth, to ensure that development occurs in a responsible and sustainable manner, and that also supports population growth and maintains a healthy tax base. Now, as part of that, one of the things that we were directed to look at was the TCEA. Is it working the way it intended? Should we expand it? Should we change it in any certain way? So we started a study doing that. We're still in the early stages of it, so really don't have any recommendations, but wanted to get with you up front to make sure we're looking at this the way you intended when you talked about it back in your retreat. And to make the presentation itself, I'd like to turn it over to Ryan Cunningham with Kittleson Associates, and he'll go over it with you. And we're looking for any and all feedback that you'd like to give us.
Thank you, Bill.
Good morning, Commissioners. Morning. Ryan Cunningham with Kittleson Associates. As Bill mentioned, we're really here this morning to give you an update on what we've been doing with the study, where we're at. We're less than halfway through it, but we're at a good position to give you an update, ask for feedback in terms of the direction that we're headed, make sure that we're answering the questions that you all want answered. So for our short presentation, I'll give you a background on the study, an overview of the policy and literature review that we've conducted so far, and what our next steps are in this study. So as Bill mentioned, the Commission took a retreat in October 2019 and identified key strategic priorities out of that retreat. And one of those was to study the effectiveness or the impacts of the county's Transportation Concurrency Exception Area. I'll call that TCEA for short throughout this presentation. So the key questions that came out of that we're trying to answer: one, where does the TCEA help establish development where the county wants that development to happen? And then what type? Does the TCEA encourage the type of development consistent with Seminole County's policies and plans within the TCEA area? So the objective of our study is to evaluate the TCEA and to understand how the TCEA has impacted development in different parts of the county and what type of development it has helped to bring about since its inception. The study scope includes a policy and literature review, which I'll review some of the results from that today. We're in the middle of evaluating the land use changes that have occurred since that TCEA was put in place. And that's looking at the types of land use, the densities of land use and intensities before and during the TCEA's implementation. We're doing one-on-one interviews with each city within the county, as well as a couple of peer counties in the area to see how they're dealing with TCEAs and mobility fees, and so those counties are Orange, Osceola, and Volusia. And then we'll be providing recommendations for your consideration at the end of the study. So as I mentioned, we're about halfway through, a little bit less than halfway through, getting towards the end of that policy and literature review, kind of in the midst of the land use and property value analysis, and have also begun our engagement with the peer counties. So within our overview, what we're trying to do is establish how transportation concurrency works, what's required to implement it from a state statute perspective, and how the county implements it or could implement it. What flexibility do you have in implementing concurrency? And then how does a transportation concurrency, how does a system without transportation concurrency, so when you have a TCEA in place, based on Florida statute, how is that supposed to work, and how is the county implementing it? And then what are some other, beyond TCEA and concurrency, what are other mobility options that you have at your disposal? So just defining terms, I know this is probably not common language that you all use on a day-to-day basis, so just to define those terms up front, transportation concurrency is a growth management strategy to assess if a roadway has enough capacity to support additional development. Transportation concurrency exception areas, TCEAs, are designated areas which use methods other than concurrency to incentivize infill development and promote more multimodal options. So it's more in dense areas. You would have a TCEA that would give you more flexibility than concurrency gives you. An impact fee is a funding system for roadway infrastructure. The focus there is on roadway. And then a mobility fee is a funding system for transportation infrastructure, gives more flexibility for multimodal infrastructure and multimodal options. So the current state of practice in the county, in 2009, the Florida legislature passed the Community Renewal Act, which established dense urban land areas, referred to as doulas, and TCEAs and doulas basically cover the same area. So the statute required that doulas would adopt land use and transportation strategies into their comprehensive plans to fund mobility within their TCEAs. In Seminole County, all of the non-rural areas in the county were designated a doula and basically put under TCEA at that point. So in terms of where that is, if you look at this map, you have within the green outline is considered doulas within the county. These are under the transportation concurrency exception area. So this includes all of the city limits, and it includes the county limits as well, outside of the rural charter area and the Wekiva River Protection Area. So it's essentially most of the center of the county. Likewise, what's not included in the TCEA, that's where we have concurrency in place and still in use. That includes the rural charter area in the eastern part of the county and the Wekiva River Protection Area in the northwestern part of the county. I also want to mention TCEA and mobility fee are separate things, but this is something that has occurred recently in Seminole County, so I want to just make mention of that because it's related. In 2021, last year, the mobility fee replaced road impact fees in the county and provides more flexibility on what improvements can be made as a result of development. As part of that initiative, mobility fee districts were introduced. And so the core district is basically right down that spine of, west of 1792, east of I-4, and then also kind of everything that's fronting 436 in the county. And then west of that, you have what's called the suburbs west, and then to the east, you have the suburbs east, and the rural district is its own separate district. When we talk about mobility fees within Florida statute, that's local governments are encouraged to develop these tools and techniques to complement the application of concurrency, or in our case, concurrency exceptions. In Florida statutes, a mobility fee is the only alternative that's explicitly mentioned. Doesn't mean it's the only one that can be used, but it's the one that's defined in Florida statutes, and it has a section in the statutes that say how mobility fees must comply with that. Our review of the mobility fee that the county has adopted is that the county is set up for the full flexibility of statute, so it's a good thing. You haven't limited, yourself and how you can apply it and use it. In terms of our next steps, as I mentioned, we're getting started with our county peer exchanges. We've engaged a couple of them already. The hurricane set us back a little bit because we had a couple scheduled for that week, and so we've got one this Friday that's a reschedule from that. We've started our land use analysis. Our land use analysis is looking at land property values prior to the TCEA versus today, and then also, what types of land uses have changed. So we've gone from, say, single family to multifamily, or something that's more dense, or something that has, mixed use. We're looking into and evaluating where are those things happening, and is the TCA encouraging that type of development as intended. And then, as I mentioned, also we'll be engaging with the cities within Seminole County as well to see how they feel the TCEA is working for development in their communities. So again, just a reminder of the key questions that we're trying to answer, and one of the reasons we want to give you an update today, but we also wanted to gather that feedback to see, are we headed in the right direction with this study? Are we answering the questions that the commission is interested in knowing the answers to? So is development happening where Seminole County wants? And is the type of development consistent with Seminole County's policies and plans? Those are the questions we're trying to answer with this TCEA study. So with that, I'll leave those questions up there. Take any questions from you all or any feedback.
Questions from the board? Commissioner Zimbauer.
I would be interested in knowing, thank you, Mr. Chairman, I would be interested in knowing the interaction with the city of Oviedo and Winter Springs, which has some land use things that are in flux as they revamp their codes. Do you see any struggle with that or any delay, or how are you handling that to complete the study?
We've not engaged the cities yet, but that's what we'll be doing after we finish this county peer review. So that's certainly a question that I'll write down as something we want to be asking it. You're asking?
So my fear is we endeavor and we engage.
Yeah.
And those elected officials may not make a decision on their aspect for it. Could be another year. And how we're going to monitor that and revisit it should they make significant changes to make sure that we are doing the right thing countywide.
Understand, yeah. I think, yeah, so our approach will probably be engaging with the staff at those cities to understand how are they implementing these processes, what's working, and with these changes in play or potentially happening, what's not working that would lead your leaders to want to do that.
And then finally, are you engaging with MPO Orlando to help gather whatever information you might need, since we all are part and parcel of that?
Yeah.
Which should be a good resource for the cities, the sister counties, to the region, and so forth.
We have reached out to them for data, and like I said, we've engaged Orange County and Osceola County, so not as part of Metro Plan necessarily, but as partners with the Metro Plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Lockhart.
In talking about peer counties, are we looking at other counties that are similar to us that are out of maybe this region? Osceola and Orange are certainly very different than we are. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we had kind of surveyed the state to see if there were other counties that made a lot of sense. Hillsborough County came up as an option, but we kind of tested the waters with them, and they weren't doing a lot with TCEA that would really give us any insight. So we decided to add a different county that would provide a little bit more value.
Okay, so again, you're looking at Orange and Osceola.
And Volusia.
And Volusia. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any other questions?
I don't have any questions. I may have some comments, but I don't have any questions.
We'll open up for comments then. Any comments?
Well, I think that, one of the things that I think is most important about this is, I know we've endeavored upon this study, but the reality is, Seminole County is one of the slowest growing counties right now in the Central Florida region for obvious reasons. There's just not a whole lot of land left there to do. And most of it's going to be driven towards the cities. So I think it's paramount that we are on top of what the city's future plans are. And like I said, there's a lot of it in flux right now with some of the cities as they shift and change and plan their future. And I would beg to say that they're going to have the biggest impact on this study, more so than what we're going to actually have here in the county. So I think that's where I think, for me, I need to clearly understand that we've got full engagement with those cities and how that ultimately affects us. Because the average citizen sees Seminole County as Seminole County. They don't see it as, lines and jurisdictional control in different cities, and I think that's going to be important that we emphasize where those impacts are going to come based on what those particular municipalities are going to do. So, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Constantine?
Thank you. Very good point by Commissioner Zimbauer. I've seen us in other situations where this board had to make sure that we were engaging the cities. And especially when it comes to growth, especially because they have the infrastructure available, water and sewer, et cetera, and have the mobility internally. The density should and probably, hopefully, will be going to the cities. So I don't know if we've done this the opposite way we should, but I know that you're just in the early stages. So as soon as you can engage with the 7 cities, I think that's extremely important to the success of this.
Commissioner Lockhart?
Just following up on that really important line of thought process. Just for clarification, when we say that the cities are where the density is going to go, is that because we're assuming that the county property that's in that urban core is going to be annexed by the cities that currently exist in order for it to be developed? I'm wondering what the predicate is for that thought process.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
In my opinion, not necessarily.
Okay.
Now, there will be occasions, especially when they're contiguous to it, that they should be. Quite frankly, especially if they've got water and sewer. But no, I don't see necessarily, but I do encourage properties that might be contiguous to consider very seriously annexation, and it's certainly the cities themselves also looking at it. Now, we're not talking about currently existing neighborhoods. We're talking about new developments. Currently existing neighborhoods obviously are not going to be annexed without a long procedure that they want. But when we're dealing with this type of mobility feed districts and the core and the suburbs, I really do believe that if we are not engaged and going down the same road, if you will, then I think that, this thing could just blow up on us.
Commissioners, at the very least, and let me just follow up on that, if I may. We are having a mayors and managers meeting today, and we're hosting it. The topic on our agenda today is 2. One is an update from emergency management brief, just post-storm. And then the other one, which is the lion's share of the meeting, will be an update of the library master plan. The reason I'm bringing that up is because we can also, at that time, ask for this topic to be put on a future agenda item for the mayors and managers, so that it's another look at it to make sure that there's continued dialogue. And I think we can do that very easily, Mr. Applegate, if there's no objections. Now, Commissioner Lockhart, you wanted to say something? Didn't mean to cut you off.
No, not at all. I just want to, we're talking about at least the majority of that core is my district, and it's, right? So it's pretty much District 4. When we're looking at most of that area, it's redevelopment, right? So coupled with this topic, of course, are the other things that we need to be thinking about in our land development code that will marry the opportunity for that redevelopment and make it attractive. So I want to make sure that I'm understanding that this is not a one-trick pony. This is this concept coupled with all of the other things that we'll need to do to redevelop that core to make sure that we're getting head
Yeah,
on.
we
Okay.
we are, as part of this process, it's not just where the TCA is and what's happened there, but it's how does the county take a development through the process? So yeah, we're very much looking at the land development code. How is that implemented and carried out by staff?
Okay.
So to address Commissioner Lockhart's inquiry and correct her district takes up a good lion's share of that urban core. I'm on one side of it, she's on the other side of it, Commissioner Herr's got a slice of it as well. We have agreements with the city of Sanford and Castleberry on annexation when services are provided. And both of those are slated to do some pretty significant growth over the next decade or two. And I think this is why it's so important that we understand where they're headed, because many of them are updating their future land use and all their codes and so forth. If we don't get it right now, then we're going to be chasing that,
Right.
5 years from now, and this study is really for naught if we don't clearly understand what they're going to do. So that was my concern.
See, Ryan, I have a question for you, if I may. So you're looking at the area for the mobility fee, correct? Basically.
Mm-hmm.
And how deep will you be diving into the mobility fee?
Well, the mobility fee had its own study that finished up last year, so we're not looking to repeat any of what
Okay.
that did. And because it just went into place last year, it's hard to, evaluate how effective that's been in the past 12 months. So we want to be aware that it's there and that the evaluation that we're doing on land use could be affected already by what the mobility fee has put in place. So really understanding its potential effect on what's happening and what could happen.
So when you dialogue with the cities, you could be talking about, because some of them have made agreements with us that they'll be looking at some changes to their mobility fee depending upon their growth initiatives. Will you be looking on how that will be affecting us as a county?
Yeah, that will be part of our interviews with them, is to understand what their plans are for mobility fees and what they're looking to do differently, if anything.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Do you have something, Bill? Yeah.
Good morning. For the record, Rebecca Hammock, Development Services Director. I just wanted to make one point of clarification just on some background from where the study came from. When we were involved in the retreat activities, there were a couple different retreats that occurred with the Board of County Commissioners. One topic that had come up was, is the transportation concurrency exception area appropriate for all areas of the county within the urban area? And it was mostly, I think, directed at the suburban area that's indicated now on the mobility fee map. And we're not necessarily a staff advocate, we're not advocating that the TCA be removed, especially in that core area, because that does incentivize development within that area that we want. It was more of looking at the suburbs and, is the TCA appropriate for all areas of the suburbs, or would the county benefit from concurrency in those areas? So I just want to make that point of clarification.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, before you leave, Commissioner Constantine?
Just one last comment or question. How is this relationship with the cities going to dovetail with getting them working on their projects as we need to work on our projects and are working on our projects through the staff with the sales tax coming up? And that may not be a question to you, it may be more of a question to the county manager.
That's a question for Mr. Applegate.
Yeah.
Mr. Applegate, would you like to address that?
As far as how it's going to work with cities, boy,
Well,
I didn't ask the question.
Mr. County Manager, when hold on, when we're starting to work, as we've done before in the last 3 generations, of the sales tax to bring it forth to the people, we have always listed numerous projects that not only we, but other cities, but the cities would also be doing. And, as we're going through this transportation, it may not be directly a part of this, but it does dovetail into the possibility of them starting to look at their projects and everything else. And I know the commissioners, other commissioners have talked about when we're going to start that process. We've always said that, it's coming up, we're going to start it in '23. I just want to make sure that we use this process as a potential to help start stimulating that
Oh, sure, absolutely.
activity.
Absolutely.
That's all. I wasn't trying to say, what have you done? I'm just saying,
We have, and again, as we said, we're going to start in January, but we've already had some strategy meetings. It's going to be a lot of work. We're ready to do it. I wish I can give you a timeline.
I'm not asking for it.
Okay.
I just want to make sure this process works in coordination with that
Absolutely.
process. That's all.
Thank you. Before we move on, Shaney, do we have any written requests to speak to the board?
We do not.
Is there anyone in the audience that'd like to speak to the board on this issue? Anyone in the audience? Going to close public input? Public input's now closed. What else we have?
And thank you again for that and the feedback. Our next project is the updating of the county's 2040 transportation plan. So this will be the 2045 transportation mobility plan. Last time we looked at alternative modes of transportation as well. This time we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into that and really look at the last mile for the Sunrail stations. The Sunrail service itself, Links created a study in 2021 for the county, take a serious look at that and see what may be feasible and those type of things, bring that back to you. But again, we're fairly in the beginning stages of this plan. Just want to make sure before we get too far down the road that we're in alignment of where you would like to see things go. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tom Ross with Jacobs, who is the project manager working on this. He'll give you the update. And again, all feedback is greatly appreciated.
Morning, Commissioners. As Bill said, I'm Tom Ross with Jacobs Engineering. Today we're here to talk about the Seminole County 2045 Transportation Mobility Plan. Oh, thank you. So just a brief update to refresh everybody's mind about the transportation plan. This plan is typically updated every 5 years, usually has a horizon of 20 years. So in this case, we're going to be doing an update to 2045. And on this time around, we're naming it the Transportation Mobility Plan. And that's, of course, in concert with the new mobility plan and the new focus of this plan, which will be on full mobility. So in the 2040 plan, we did follow a traditional transportation planning process. We looked at all the modes, we looked at the deficiencies. We had a lot of projects that addressed bicycles and pedestrians, but there was still a significant allocation of funding to roadway projects, to capacity improvement. So this time in the 2045 Transportation Mobility Plan, we're going to have an increased focus on all the modes. We're going to try to make sure this is as equitable as possible. We're going to focus on the roadways more on operational improvements in access, such as access management and improving intersection operations to make everything flow better, but not necessarily focused on adding lanes. If it makes sense, that's of course something that we'll discuss, but it's not an absolute as it typically is in most transportation plans we've done in the past. So part of this study also has a sub-area that we're referring to as East Urban Area Mobility Plan. And this area is defined as the area in blue, and it's between the city of Oviedo and goes down on to the county line with Orange County. And we'll be working on that plan at the same time, or in concert with the mobility plan that the city of Oviedo is considering at this point, and also the NeoCats plan, which Orange County has recently done. And the focus of this area is to really look at the coming up with a list of specific improvements for this area that's going to help improve the mobility in the UCF area and that growing development and the build-out of that portion of the county. So that's basically a brief summary of what we're going to be doing in this study. As Bill said, we're early on. We're in the data collection phase. We're evaluating existing conditions. And we've identified some questions that we'd like to bring up right now to the board. And feel free to jump in and have some discussion at this point, or we can wait till the end, however you choose to do it. So one of the first overall questions we're going to be looking at is, what should the county's transportation system look like? So as we look out into the future, do we see it continuing in the same path that we've done in the past, where we just keep widening roads and doing some bicycle and pedestrian improvements, but really focusing on roads? Or do we try to focus on something that is just more than that, that says, hey, we need to focus on making connections and getting people, from point A to point B? And as you look at the Envision 2045 process, and also the transportation concurrency exception area evaluation and study, and you look at areas that are going to increase in density, how can we make those connections work and improve the connections between different land uses within those portions of the county? Another question that we're going to be looking at is, what should the specific emphasis areas of the transportation system be? So when I say that, I'm really focusing more on transportation modes, but it can also be geographic areas too as well. So what are the specific areas that you have in mind that need work and need help and need to be improved? And what are the deficiencies? So those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at as we go through this. As Bill mentioned, one of the key focuses will be on those last mile connections from Sunrail. So what should the county's role be in developing those last mile? Of course, a lot of those stations are located within the cities, so they're going to have some role in that. And should transit be the preferred option? A lot of times we look at systems in larger urban areas, and we look at commuter rail, and we look at connections to other transportation modes, and then we look at connections with buses, but does it have to be that? And I'm not suggesting that it's one way or the other. I'm just posing the questions. So, but for example, in Altamont Springs, they've developing the circulator running from the station out to Altamont Mall. So how, would each of the areas have a system like that, or would they each be different and tailored to the specifics of that particular area around the stations? And should the plan have project-specific funding for transit improvements? And the reason this question comes up is the last plan didn't have any specific line items. We know that normally the county funds links in its regular, out of the general budget, and funds specific amounts for links, and links decides where that money goes. But are there specific things that the county may think about that may need a specific improvement? And I'm talking mainly capital improvements, but it could be anything. So it's just another question that comes up, and is that something that that can be improved in the next plan? So as we move forward along in this process, we're in this first stage, we're doing existing conditions analysis and establishing goals. And then we're going to be developing a needs plan. So that's going to be identifying all those specific deficiencies and identifying a list of projects that can address those deficiencies. That list of projects will by no means be the final say. That will be our first cut, and will be everything that we can identify. But of course, there's funding limitations, as we all know. So that's where the next process goes in. We evaluate these projects and determine which ones provide the most value, most benefit for the dollar that they're going to cost. And as we do go through that process, we're going to come down to a smaller list that fits within the county's overall budget, and that would be the cost feasible plan. And then as that's streamlined and refined, we'll develop the final plan. And we expect to get to that final plan by summer of next year. So during this whole process, we're going to have a lot of public and stakeholder engagement. We've already begun some of that. We've already met with the City of Oviedo and the City of Altamont Springs and talked about their plans. We are in the process of scheduling meetings with the rest of the cities, as well as we'll be coordinating with Links, FDOT, the airport, and Metro Plan. So we'll be talking to all these different agencies and finding out what they're doing so that whatever we're doing, we want to enhance those connections. We don't want to do anything that contradicts what they're doing, and we want the system to be a complete, seamless process. So the residents and citizens of Seminole County can feel that they can travel from one part of the county to the other and not feel like everything's somewhat disjointed and things have gotten missed. So our project schedule, again, we're at the beginning stages. We're doing this evaluation of the framework and establishing goals right now and evaluating the needs for the project. We plan to come back in the winter, sometime early next year, and have another work session with you and discuss with you the needs plan, the specific needs and deficiencies that we've identified, and what projects we think that can address some of those needs. And then later on, and then we'll follow up after that, we'll have a public meeting with the public and get their input as well. And then we'll be developing that cost feasible list and evaluating those projects and trimming it down to a list that will fit within the county's budget. And by summer of next year, we'll have a prioritized list of projects and hope to adopt the final plan in the summer of next year. So that's our contact information. At this point, I can open up for questions and bring some of those questions back up if anyone would like to go through that.
Commissioner?
Your opening salvo made it sound like there was a predetermined conclusion that road widening was a bad thing, and I'd like to be reassured that my view of that is inaccurate.
I apologize for that. I didn't intend to give that impression. I'm just merely raising the question. I think from my perspective as a transportation professional over the years, we've done a lot of projects that add more lanes, and of course, a lot of times they fill right back up, as we all know. And there's only so much limit that we can go to continue to add those lanes. And so the question we're raising is that the focus? And should it be continuously on that? Or should we embrace all of the different modes and try to come up with a balanced system that it attracts everyone? The harsh reality here is that we don't have enough money, as a society that is willing to tax itself and build these sorts of improvements. There's just insufficient funds to take care of everything, and we have to come up with a balanced system. So all we're suggesting and asking the question is that the primary focus, and should we have a more balanced system? But in no means there are appropriate times, Commissioner, for widening roadways, absolutely.
And then a follow-up question with regard to public input and potential questions that the public, I didn't see anything in there with regard to a survey, but if we go to a survey, so let me stop and ask that, is the intention to survey the public or to simply hold public meetings?
I believe we have a survey in there. I'm trying to recall what the scope had in there. I can't recall if we had a survey in there specifically or not, but we are going to have the public meeting where we'll gather that input at one point, for sure.
So if there is a survey, it would be my wish that the survey questions are exceptionally carefully crafted and have a lot of input from this organization and this board, just to make sure that they are not driving the answers in a certain direction, because then we're going to question it after the fact, and we're going to make you do the survey again, and I'd like to just avoid all of that. And the opening question led me to that conclusion as well. I would say in general, though, the notion that we have to be a little bit broader in our thinking, maybe a lot broader in our thinking, is welcomed. And the idea that we need to embrace transit because we are in the middle of this region, and most of our folks don't stay here in Seminole County all day long, and we welcome that. We do really need to think bigger. So I like the direction of the study.
Thank you.
Commissioner Zimbauer, then Commissioner Lockhart.
Thank you. I think we need to take a wide look at all the options. I mean, the reality is with the expiration of the FAST Act, as far as funding goes, it's all prioritized on multimodal now. It's driven funding on multimodal. it's really about moving people and not vehicles. And that's what really we have to focus on, in my opinion, through the region, is moving people, not vehicles. Now, to your point, there are certainly areas that there may need to be some road widening, some lanes added, some access points and so forth. But if we're really going to leverage federal funding and all those other things that really come to bear on whether projects get done or not, we're going to have to look at multimodal throughout the entire area. And I think the core area, we're certainly going to have to rely upon the cities and clearly collaborate with them to understand what their plans are versus what we can bring to the table to help, because many of these things really are going to be city-driven. And we're going to be hopefully a willing participant, but some funding is going to have to come out of the cities as well as their prop share. So it's important, imperative that they're involved in this overall discussion. So thank you very
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lockhart?
So, not being the transportation guru of the board, but knowing that there are many, each of your questions was, do we want it like this or something else? Do we want it like this or something else? And I'm here to tell you, I don't know what all of the something else's could be. I need a menu. Because my imagination is kind of going, oh my gosh, I wonder what it could be. I don't know. What could it be?
Flying cars.
So, I don't know. What are we talking about here? You know, we're delivering pizzas with drones? I don't know. What's next? So I, for one, would love to have a better idea of when you say you're looking for feedback of what else it could be. I kind of need a Chinese menu. Or Italian, or what else we have going on up here. I don't know.
Commissioner Lockhart,
Whatever.
I wasn't taking that personal, so I'm okay.
I was actually thinking Andrea. I forgot. We've got multiple Italians on the board.
Always a good thing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Commissioner
Yeah.
Constantine, any comments?
No, I think that, we're too early in the stages to really discuss, the specifics on it. The fact of the matter is, though, that I think that the comment that was made by Commissioner Zimbauer, again, was, we're in the people moving business, not in the car moving business. And, we've just gone through a beautiful addition to I-4. A lot of us are afraid to get on those expressways because we don't know where we're ever going to get off of them. But the fact of the matter is that even with all of that, the capacity is still the same. So, we are going to have to find alternatives, and I liked Commissioner Lockhart's, comment of, give me, what are the other alternatives? But just like, you mentioned it, and I'll say it again, the automated people mover in Altamont Springs is going to be an incredible addition that, hopefully it works. I expect it to work, but, that can be incorporated at other places also. But to go from the train station through to the hospital, around Crane's Roost in the mall, and then back again on a continuing basis, is innovative and exciting. And, those types of innovative approaches are what we need to start looking for.
Thank you.
Questions that I have is that one thing I did not hear about that's in the Metro plan is safety. And I really think that should be, I know you're nodding your head, that should be our number one priority. And with the Metro plan, there is vehicular safety and there's also pedestrian safety.
Absolutely.
And the commissioners are correct. It's all about people, moving people. And I think at the top of the list should be about safety and breaking it down into those different categories. And because it used to be we just talked about safety as a whole, and we didn't talk about pedestrians. And I think we need to be talking more about pedestrians, because by doing that, you're going to be, the fallback is vehicular. if you talk about pedestrians. And us being one of the most dangerous places as pedestrians in the United States, the state of Florida, not Seminole County, but the state of Florida, that is an issue. So whatever we do from a planning standpoint, safety should always be our number one priority. I did not hear that yet, and I'm sure it's in your plan somewhere. But when we talk about safety, I'm going to repeat it again, it's not just vehicular, it's pedestrian. Those are two separate categories. Please don't misunderstand that. And then I looked at your plan here on you're talking about the Oviedo 10-year mobility plan, and you talked about UCF and the East Urban Area, which is south of Oviedo, north of UCF. I don't want to put infrastructure in because those two areas want to grow, and now we're ruining neighborhoods. I want to make sure that we're talking about growth, but smart growth, not at the price of ruining someone's neighborhood. And if one of those individuals lived in that area is sitting in the back row right now. And I'm sure not just Bill, but Hope is going to be asking us quickly, what's that going to do to our neighborhood? So we need to go a little more granular about what is it going to do to the quality of life in those neighborhoods, not just that area, but all around the county. And there's other things to look at as well. But to figure out what's going to happen in the East Urban Area, you need to first look at, as you quantified, the Oviedo 10-year master plan as well as the UCF master plan. That's going to take some time, so I think your projection of your timeline is a little bit aggressive because Oviedo's not going to be done with their plan in enough time for us to look at it and to actually have the community meeting about that East Urban Area. So I think you may want to re-look at that. I like the idea of looking at alternatives, and there's a lot of different alternatives out there about moving people. I know Commissioner Constantine just spoke about that in the Altamont area. I know Oviedo's looking at it. There's other areas that want to look at it as well. The mobility transportation plan for 2045 is pretty important to us. It's already been adopted by a Metro Plan, and I'm hoping that we move forward in looking at everything seamlessly because there is limited dollars, and I'm looking forward to getting more information from you. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. Commissioner Lockhart?
Just a follow-up that's occurring to me as I'm sitting here thinking about talking about moving people. We have different types of people and different demographics that we're trying to move around the community. And I'm not too far away from having driven the Suburban with the golf bag, the baseball bag, and the lacrosse bag in the back. And I driving all over town multiple times a day. So if we're, and this community is made up of a lot of parents like that. As we're looking at moving people, I would just ask you to look at how we're going to address the suburban family being moved around town, not just the commuter, empty nester, because I would say a lot of the traffic that we have on our streets is not someone going from home to work and back again. It's all of the daytime, I got to get to Home Goods, I got to get to Publix, I got to get picked up, and then we got to drop off, and then we got to go all the way across town. And that's what I perceive to be when people say, oh my gosh, there's so much traffic in Seminole County. It's not necessarily the commuters getting out of town and back into town. I know that exists. Certainly in parts of Commissioner Delari's district, it's, you know, we hear about it a lot. And then the other thing I would say is the transit system that we do have functioning in this county right now is they're big yellow buses. And they move tens of thousands of Seminole County citizens every single day. And is there a way to capitalize or capture on that system or help enhance that system? We know that when driving around Seminole County when school is in and when school is out. So is there an opportunity to work with the school board on their transit system, since they can't be ignored? Yes, the cities, but my gosh, that is the largest system we have operating right now. So I'd like to put that out there for your consideration as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lockhart's correct, and there's another aspect of it, too, if I may expound. And I'm hearing people complain about it. It's people getting to doctor's visits that don't have means of transportation. And, you know, they're asking all the time, how do I get to my doctor's visit, because I can't drive anymore. And that's part of a transportation mobility plan.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Before we leave, Shaney, do you have any written requests? Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board at this time? Anyone in the audience? Going to close the public input? Public input's now closed. Mr. Applegate, do you have any additional comments?
I believe staff and our consultants have the direction they've been looking for, and, you know, both of these studies are very important for the future of the county. They remind me of the Johnny Carson Art Fern routine, about how do you get there, and it is vitally important for the future of the county. So this may not be the only session like this where you're coming back for further direction. So unless staff has any other comments, I think we stand ready to close on these two topics.
Want to make sure first, we'll get back to you, because I know you want to talk to the board.
I have one more inquiry.
Mr. Zimbauer, Commissioner?
As part and parcel of this, and I know a couple of commissioners that are on MPO and maybe on links, are you going to be looking at, as part and parcel of this, anything related to distracted driving and education related to that? I mean, this is a big problem in transportation right now, which is you have plenty of roadway, but because of the cell phone use, distracted driving, they're not efficient. And it's the actions of the driver, not necessarily the design of the roadway. From an educational process, I think we need to look at some of that, as well as lobbying our legislature to really take a hard look at our cell phone use. And I realize that's not really part of that, but I think it has to be part of the real impacts of moving transportation through the community is the distracted driving. I mean, we've all sit at the traffic light and go, the light takes forever, but when it does turn green, it takes another 30 seconds because somebody's on their cell phone texting or talking, or they turn across 4 lanes of traffic trying to get to the left turn. That's all a problem. It slows down and causes congestion and, of course, unsafe completely. So I would like to understand if we're going to have an aspect looking at an educational process of helping people stay undistracted, as well as how we quantify that distracted driving. As you know, the engineering manuals don't even consider anything for distracted driving when it comes to design characteristics of a roadway and moving traffic and so forth. So that within itself is a problem.
Commissioner Zimbauer, you're spot on, and Mr. Rhodes, maybe you can shed some light on this. We've had conversations at MetroPlan regarding the transportation model that we use, that the state of Florida uses, and we use here locally. It does not address distracted driving. And the last time I've had a conversation with experts like yourself, anywhere between 15 to 18% efficiency is lost because of distracted driving, and it could be even more. We've had conversations with DOT regarding that, and it's all based on the algorithms of the transportation model, and so far, people have not been able to address it. Didn't know if you've been able to shed any light on it.
Well,
On the
my
transportation
understanding,
model.
I'm sorry.
On the transportation model. Yeah.
My understanding of transportation modeling, and I've done quite a bit myself in the past, is while there is a way to build that into the algorithm, essentially what you would do, and as you said, you would lose 15 to 20%. The number probably varies depending on who you talk to, but you lose that efficiency. And essentially what that translates into is a reduction of capacity.
Correct.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, when you run that through in your analysis, the answer you're likely to get is you need more lanes.
Right.
You need more infrastructure. That's unfortunately the answer I expect that you would get. I can't say that for certain because I haven't run that analysis, but I would expect that would be the answer.
Yeah, the University of Texas has some pretty serious studies on it, probably the leading institute that actually has done those studies.
Right. And the only other way to really address that is from an enforcement standpoint, I would think.
Right.
How do you stop it from happening? Education and enforcement would probably be the most economically efficient ways to address that, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Commissioner Herr?
I don't think enforcement is an economic opportunity or a public relations opportunity either. But I think the point should be reinforced in the sense that the answer to it is education, and the study needs to contemplate education to include regional partners. One of the challenges that I think we have as a region with regard to educating on anything is that we all feel compelled to do it ourselves, as opposed to be willing to roll up the funds and submit to one agency to take the lead on it. And we've seen CFX do it, we've seen Lynx make an attempt at doing it, we've seen the local communities doing it, we've seen FDOT doing it, and it's all bifurcated messaging. And so that piece may be something that we could be the catalyst for in the area to actually improve the way we communicate with the citizens that live in multiple jurisdictions. And I actually use my horn quite a bit more. I've gone back to New Jersey-style driving because of the number of people that just sit at the red light. So there's a solution. It's pretty inexpensive.
Thank you, Commissioner.
But scary.
Until that horn wears out.
Well, I would also say that I think it's appropriate that we had this work session 2 weeks before Mobility Week, so I think it was appropriate to have it today. Any other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Staff. Okay, I'd like to turn over the podium to Mr. Applegate. Mr. Applegate wanted to talk to us about an issue?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And these are two administrative matters that don't require voting, but I wanted to give you an update on the first one. And there, the issue about citizens coming to the desk where the interns sit at the front entrance and by the building office. What we're going to do is the interns, and they've been instructed on this morning, that if they don't know the answer, they are going to send the citizen to the building area, the glass area where the customer service desks are, and the citizens will be helped there. So particularly on hurricane recovery, there will be signage. The building department can direct a person to the citizen information line, which is still in use, the dashboard, those kind of things. We're working on a whole system for the hurricane relief. So that is now underway. What I would ask, the second part of this, is that your aides, for example, Tricia, Melanie, and I, we always talk about who's in and who's not, and make sure that one of us are, in. I would ask that your aides, if they're going to be on PTO, which they're certainly, like everybody else, entitled to do, but that rather than just go on PTO and leave a message that they're on PTO, that they actually have someone that, if the person's downstairs and want to see Commissioner X, and that aide is on PTO, that one of the other commissioner's aides will take that call as a secondary source. Yesterday we had a situation where the intern didn't know what to do, and I understand that. It was not their job. So I would ask that, and then also, as a last resort, either Rebecca with the building, overseeing the building department, or my office would be the final, like, okay, if we can't get anybody else, then we're going to get with the county manager. And they'll have my cell phone number to give out. So I would ask that you consider asking your aides to have that system in place so that if they're on PTO, the people downstairs, and my office for that matter, know who we can quickly call to either get a message to that person or if it's something that needs to be handled right away.
Any questions? Commissioner Hurd and Commissioner Zimbaum?
Yeah, just a few. I'm going to start from the top of the announcement to the bottom of the announcement. I think what I heard was that the intern is going to direct the person to the building department. If it's hurricane-related, the building department is going to refer them to a phone number.
If they have to, if the building department can't answer the question for them. We need an employee who knows the county system fairly well. So, and it may not just be hurricane related, but if a person comes in with a utility issue, the building department will know, obviously, who that person can contact, or they make that contact for the person.
And so just out of curiosity, it has been my experience since the very beginning of my tenure here that the building department does not have open capacity.
Does that have what?
Open capacity.
They're busy.
They're busy. They're busy. Stuff has been backed up since the day I arrived here, so adding to their daily burden doesn't feel right to me. I'll weigh in on that. Maybe we don't need to discuss that further, but this does not feel like a viable solution to me. I think it's maybe a short-term solution to a longer-term solution, but probably not a long-term solution. And then with regard to PTO for the aides, I don't know why we would all manage that independently. Wouldn't it seem that each one of them has a backup, and we all know who the backup is, and it just is what it is, and somebody puts that together for us and we call it a day? I don't know why we would manage that. 5 of us managing that independently is probably going to have the same outcome that we have right now, which doesn't appear to be working. Those are my thoughts.
My thoughts, I worry for all the same reasons Commissioner Hurd just mentioned for the building department. I know that all of our staff are, when asked, very willing to help, step up to the plate. And with the expectation that our building department, I think, is going to get much busier as a relationship to the hurricane, and them trying to keep up with that volume on top of the volume they're already doing. I don't necessarily have a problem if this is a short-term, like real short-term, that we try to find some better method to do that, whether it is, and the problem is you have 2 entranceways, of course, to come into the building. Maybe we need to bite the bullet and have a more informed employee at both entrances, or maybe there needs to be a kiosk set up with some kind of communications capability that pick up a hotline that goes straight to, so I don't know the answer to that. There's a lot of solutions that could be deployed, but I worry about the building department. I know they're good people and they'll step up and they'll do anything we ask them to do, which could be part of the reason why they get backed up to begin with, because they are so helpful and do want to help. I think we need to be looking more of a longer-term fix. Short-term, I'm okay with that. I don't necessarily have a problem. As far as PTO, I mean, I can handle whatever everybody decides, but my office, our phones are available 24/7. I mean, we had calls at 5 a.m. this morning before the county even opened. So I don't have a problem if my office wants to pass off to Bob's office or Andrea's office or somebody else's in the times that we're not there, and we typically try to do that, but our phones are typically on 24/7 if someone needs my office.
But this was a PTO request, so
Sure.
you wouldn't expect, no county employee would be expected to keep their phone on during vacation.
Sure.
And so that's a workplace environment situation. So during PTO, can we just simply line up who the backup list is?
I'll withdraw the request. We'll find a person. First of all, we're talking about, I think yesterday we had one person come. I'm just trying to avoid a situation you were all concerned about a couple months ago when some citizen went down there and didn't know nobody knew where to direct her. So we're not talking about a line of people down First Avenue waiting to see or talk to somebody. This is just so that when a citizen comes in, those interns can't be expected to know everything about the county. So, and on the aides, I'm not trying to manage your aides. Whatever you want to do is fine with me. But that's fine.
Commissioner Lockhart and Commissioner Constantine.
So from a historical perspective, the aid backup rotation was something that always existed. It was well-known. It was distributed everywhere. Where that, I will tell you, can break down is when some folks are not here consistently, and when the expectation is that, or there's a lack of communication among the aides, and when someone does take PTO spontaneously, then there's no way to plan for, hey, I'm going to be on vacation next week, you're not going to be on vacation, right? There has to be some better communication between the five of them, I think, in order to make that backup rotation work. And spontaneity always throws a monkey wrench in that works. So there's no perfect system, certainly. I'm wondering if there isn't an opportunity. Certainly no one expects that intern to know everything, but a congenial, you know what, I don't know, but let me call up to the county manager, who I think there's always someone in the county manager's office answering the phone, whether it's the receptionist or someone. If one of our aides, for whatever reason, isn't there, the answer should not be, I'm sorry, there's no one answering that phone, and send them on their way. The answer should be, let me find someone to help you. It doesn't have to be a person standing in the building department. It can be a phone call to 7219 and have someone from the county manager's office come down and assist them. They've already made the trip, the physical trip to this building. They're pissed because they probably already called 5 times. So they don't want to be directed to a phone number. I think, you know, Mr. County Manager, you are exactly right. They need to be helped right then and there. You know, sometimes the building department has a long line, sometimes they don't. It's a fluid situation, but I would think that those interns could at least be directed to be in a customer service mindset of, I'm so sorry, let me see how I can help you. And the fact that someone is or isn't in our office really isn't the point. It's that we're going to find someone who can get you the help that you need.
Yeah,
That's my perspective.
Like a hotline, just they could pick up the phone and call.
The intern can pick up the phone
Sure.
and call 7219, which is the reception desk at the county manager's office, and someone up there can then, you know, disseminate it, however to be disseminated. But I don't know. Those are my 2 cents, and that's all it's worth is 2, maybe even only 1.5.
There's a lot of ways it can be dealt with.
Commissioner Constantine.
All constructive suggestions. County Manager, I take it upon yourself that you will just do what's right. I don't think we need to get into the weeds of this. I don't think that there's a line of people that are coming in that need to do this. I think that you have looked at this and made a decision, and I'm willing to go with it until it looks like there may be something else that's needed. As far as the aides, I mean, they're competent people that can, you know, work this thing out. I know that they do it all the time, and I don't think we need to get too far into the weeds there either. So, whatever you feel is right, you know, it's your job, and I respect your decision.
Mr. Applegate, I believe that you're trying to take a proactive measurement to try to correct what is perceived to be an issue or a potential issue. I commend you for that, and look forward for your continued guidance. I have no problem following your leadership. And when it comes to the aides, I know that Melanie does a very good job of, I think, having those meetings and working with them, and look forward to hearing from you and Melanie of what the process is, and I have no issue with it. But thank you, Mr. Applegate. Okay. Any other discussion from the board on this issue? Commissioner Constantine?
Not on this issue.
Commissioner Herr?
I just want to throw out there that I heard loud and clear there was a request with regard to the aides. That request was directed to us to have us actually comply with whatever the system is that you come up with. So I'm just throwing it back to the five of us that this isn't, go forth and multiply with the aides. It's once you do, we're going to lean in and say, this is the system and we're all going to follow it. I'm looking around for nods here, because
No, I
it's not
concur.
fair to dump that back and say,
I'm not
do
trying
whatever
to
you
dump it
want.
back on Mr. Applegate. There's been a process in the past about the aides working well together through a central person. I believe that central person is Melanie. I believe they've had a backup plan before, and if they had it before, I'm sure that they're going to continue with it, and I look forward for their guidance. I have no problem supporting what they're suggesting.
Yeah, and to that point, there is a protocol, and always was a protocol in place, and I think the last time it was utilized, and I'm not pointing fingers or making anything other than what it is when I was the chair, when COVID hit, all that sort of just went poof. Because now we have people working remotely, sometimes 3 days a week, 2 days a week, whatever it is, remote, et cetera, et cetera. But there was protocol and policy there that was followed, as to Commissioner Lockhart's point, that was always handed from one office to the other, and the aides communicated and did whatever they did. So I don't know that we need to reinvent the wheel as far as that's concerned. Just if there's going to be some of our aides working remote, I know my aides right now is out in the field with me quite a bit, out in the district because of the hurricanes and meeting with constituents and so forth. But we have our phones with us all the time. So I don't think it's a big mountain to climb. We could just figure it out.
Any other issues, any topic, any other conversation on this topic? Mr. Applegate, is there anything I'd like to bring back? Okay. Mr. Chipak, you have anything?
The only thing is, yesterday, I believe you received a email from Mr. Dave Axel in regards to the Yarborough meeting, and they've requested a continuance from the October 25th date to, I believe it's December 13th. I just want to give the accurate date, to December 13th. So when it comes up on October 25th, the only item on the agenda for that particular item would be the granting of that requested continuance. This is their first requested continuance. Under our rules of procedure for meetings, the applicant is entitled to ask for 2 continuances.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Seeing none, this work session. Any other discussion?
Yes, sir. I'm not saying we changed the policy, but I have not gotten the email. Was there a reason other than they just asked for continuance?
They asked for the continuance, and the reason they listed was the Planning and Zoning Commission had raised several issues,
Okay.
and they wanted to further address those issues.
Thank you. The second thing, Commissioner, there was an article that concerned me, and I just wanted to know if we could have, some more information concerning the contamination of wells. And I would like to know a little bit more about that. I don't know who could give us that information. Contamination of wells after Ian. Is there somebody that can give us just an update today?
Kim Hornberg did
Kim.
get with all of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can't give you an overview, but I can
Thank
tell you
you.
in my
Please don't.
district, there's been a lot of wells flooded. And initially, the state said they would not allow the health department to fund testing those wells. That since has been reversed.
Good.
So now constituents can get their wells tested for contamination through the Department of Health.
And I talked
And
to
be
a
happy.
citizen this morning about that.
Is there some way we can disseminate that widely as quickly as
I
possible?
think it was out next door. I saw it a week ago on the county website, or one of our
Okay.
information people put it out there.
I will have our Director of Environmental Services.
Clearly, this always happens when we
Sure.
have flooding, but there's always a lot of questions also. So I just wanted to make sure that, that people are getting the information they need. And then I think also, we should look at the long-term implications also, not just, I understand they're private wells, but I still think that we need to look at the long-term implications of that, of contamination of wells.
Yesterday, I sent an all-employee email out reminding everyone that we all need to understand, as I did this morning with a citizen on the phone who was very upset. But we all need to understand, I know you do, but to remind the employees that when we get complaints and concerns from citizens who have, the person I worked with this morning, it was about the well contamination. She was having it tested this morning. That people are stressed to the gill. And so when employees are out there and they're getting yelled at, they're getting complaints, to try and understand that these folks are really, a lot of them are going to either lose their homes or have substantial damages and issues, and we all need to be, as employees, as public servants, we need to understand that. So, and I had to practice that myself this morning when, so, but I will have Kim get with all of you and have a report. One of the other things I should talk about is I plan to have an all-department head meeting with Alan Harris. I don't call them hot washes. I learned that we call them scrubs. What we all could have done better, what we did right, what we did wrong, how we can improve, the things that we did great, how do we incorporate those into SOPs, because I learned during this experience. And I could have done a better job with some communication issues during the storm and right after the storm. So that is in the works. And then what I plan to do after that is meet with each of you individually to report on that scrub, then get your individual thoughts, and then actually have a work session when the dust settles from all this, so that we can talk about, what we did right, what we could do better on the next one.
Mr. Chairman, as he does always, Mr. Harris is always very organized, putting together the problems, the concerns, and I think that's a great thing that you're doing, Mr. Applegate. I know he was putting a list of the things that, that had come in, the ones that various complaints. It was just that the other day I was talking to him, and I added another one. There was a citizen that called me very concerned because now alligators were in her front yard.
Oh, yeah.
And she had never had to deal with that. People are having, and had no idea what to do. So just like all of you would have done, I said, call FWC, and they'll take care of it. But there is a lot of stress out there, and there is a lot of people that are dealing with things that they had never had to deal with before.
Commissioner Lockhart?
While we have just a little bit more time, and this, certainly we don't have this opportunity to talk, just the five of us, in sunshine very often. So I kind of want to break from tradition a little bit, if I could, and bring up the topic of the reorganization that will take place on November 15th. Certainly, we have an election between now and then, but given that three of you have already been chairman over the course of the last 3 years, I'd like to just put out for consideration that either of us be considered for chairman at this next reorg. Because we're not allowed to talk about that, obviously, individually or off the dais, or, sometimes there are outside forces that like to help to determine who will be the next chair. I thought, what a great way to let the air out of the balloon from some of those folks who like to be involved in that process from outside, if the five of us have the opportunity to just say where we are. So I thought I would just put that out publicly.
All I can say is just pray you don't have a pandemic if you're that person.
Understood.
No kidding.
Any other items the board member would like to speak about? This meeting is now adjourned.
The